The orc woman's blood dripped onto the snow in dark crimson drops, each one a countdown to her death, and Paxton Thornwell knew that if he turned away now, he would see her lifeless body in his nightmares for the rest of his days. She had collapsed against the stone wall of his barn, her massive frame trembling with exhaustion and cold, one hand pressed against a wound in her side that looked deep enough to be fatal. Her green skin had gone pale, almost gray at the edges, and her tusks were clenched together as she fought to stay conscious. When her amber eyes met his, there was no pleading in them, only resignation, as if she had already accepted that death would find her here in the snow outside a human's homestead. Paxton had spent 5 years building this farm on the frontier, carving a life out of the wilderness at the edge of the Greymark territories, where human settlements met orc clan lands. He had survived harsh winters, crop failures, and the occasional wild animal attack. He had learned to be cautious, to trust his instincts, to keep his hunting rifle loaded and his doors locked at night. Everything in his experience told him that an orc at his doorstep meant danger, but this woman was dying and he could not walk away. "Can you stand?" he asked, keeping his voice level even as his heart hammered against his ribs. She looked at him with confusion and suspicion warring in her expression. Her lips moved, but no sound came out at first. Then, with obvious effort, she rasped, "Why?" It was a fair question. Paxton had heard the stories, same as everyone else. Orcs were raiders, warriors, monsters who killed humans without mercy. The territorial conflicts between their peoples had raged for generations. Just last winter, a trading post 30 miles south had been attacked, and everyone said it was orcs who did it, though no one had actually seen them. "Because you are bleeding to death on my property, and I am not going to let that happen," Paxton said firmly. He set down the bucket of chicken feed he had been carrying and approached her slowly, hands visible and empty. "I have medical supplies inside. I can help you if you let me." The orc woman stared at him as if he had spoken in a foreign language. Her breathing was shallow and rapid, her pupils dilated with shock. Blood continued to seep between her fingers where she pressed her hand against the wound. "Trap," she whispered. "You want? Trap me." "No trap," Paxton said. He stopped a few feet away from her, close enough that she could strike him if she wanted to, showing her he was not afraid. Well, he was afraid, but he was more afraid of letting her die. "I am going to reach for you now. I am going to help you inside. You can fight me if you want, but I think you are too weak for that, and I think you know you will die out here in the cold." She watched him with those fierce amber eyes as he closed the distance between them. When his hands touched her arm, she flinched, but she did not pull away. Her skin was icy cold beneath his fingers, and he could feel how violently she was shaking. Up close, he could see that she was younger than he had first thought, probably no more than 20 summers, and beneath the blood and dirt and exhaustion, her face had a kind of stark beauty to it, all sharp angles and strong features. "I have you," he said quietly, and he did not know why those words felt so important, so weighted with meaning beyond the immediate moment. "Come on, one step at a time." She was heavy, her muscular frame solid and dense, but Paxton was strong from years of farm work. He got his shoulder under her arm and half carried, half dragged her across the snowy yard to his cabin. The door swung open under his boot, and then they were inside, surrounded by the warmth of the fire he had left burning in the hearth. He maneuvered her to the bed in the corner and eased her down onto it. She collapsed onto the rough wool blankets with a groan of pain that she tried to stifle. Her hand never left the wound on her side. "Let me see," Paxton said, reaching for the torn leather of her tunic. Her other hand shot up and grabbed his wrist with surprising strength. "No," she growled, and for the first time he heard the dangerous edge in her voice, the predator beneath the wounded creature. "You are going to die if I do not treat that wound," Paxton said, meeting her eyes steadily. "I do not know what happened to you or why you came here, but I am telling you right now that I mean you no harm. I am a farmer, not a soldier. I know how to stitch up an injury because I have stitched up my own after accidents in the field. That is all this is. Medicine. Nothing else." She searched his face for a long moment, and he could see the calculation happening behind her eyes, weighing her options, measuring the risk of trusting him against the certainty of death if she did not. Finally, slowly, her grip on his wrist loosened. "If you hurt me, I will kill you before I die," she said flatly. "Fair enough," Paxton said, and he thought he saw the tiniest flicker of surprise cross her face at his calm acceptance of her threat. He worked quickly, peeling back the layers of blood-soaked leather and cloth to expose the wound beneath. It was a deep gash that ran from her ribs to her hip, the edges ragged as if from a blade that had caught and torn. Not a clean cut, but not as bad as he had feared either. The bleeding was steady but not arterial. He could save her. He cleaned the wound with whiskey, and she hissed in pain but did not cry out. When he began to stitch the torn flesh back together, she bit down on one of his leather-work gloves to keep from screaming, her whole body rigid with agony. He worked as carefully and quickly as he could, his hands steady despite the strangeness of the situation, despite the fact that he was sewing up an orc woman in his own bed while the winter wind howled outside. When he finally tied off the last stitch and wrapped clean bandages around her middle, he found that his hands were shaking. He sat back on the edge of the bed and realized that he had been holding his breath. The orc woman spat out the glove and lay panting on the bed, her face shining with sweat. Her eyes were closed, her jaw clenched so tight he could see the muscles jumping in her cheeks. "Done," Paxton said quietly. "The worst is over." She opened her eyes and looked at him, and there was something raw and vulnerable in that look, something that made his chest ache in a way he did not understand. "Why?" she asked again, and this time her voice broke on the word. Paxton stood and moved to the fire, giving her space, giving himself time to think about his answer. He added another log to the flames and watched the sparks spiral upward. Outside, night was falling fast, turning the world beyond his windows into a realm of shadows and snow. "Because everyone deserves a chance to live," he said finally, "even if the whole world says otherwise." She was silent for a long time. When he glanced back at her, he saw that tears were sliding down her temples into her dark hair, leaving clean tracks through the dirt on her face. She did not make a sound, but her shoulders shook with silent sobs. Paxton felt something twist inside his heart, some barrier crumbling that he had not even known was there. He moved back to the bedside and sat down carefully, not touching her, just being present. "What is your name?" he asked softly. "Grushna," she whispered. "My name is Grushna." "Grushna," he repeated, tasting the unfamiliar syllables. "I am Paxton Thornwell, and from today your name is under my protection. Do you understand? No one will hurt you here, you are safe." That was when she truly wept, great gasping sobs that shook her whole body and must have hurt her wounded side terribly. Paxton did not know what else to do, so he reached out and took her hand, his pale fingers wrapping around her green ones, and he held on while she cried as if her heart was breaking. He did not ask what had happened to her that night. He did not ask where she had come from or why she had been bleeding in his yard. Those questions could wait. For now, it was enough that she was alive, and that she was here, and that he had made a promise he intended to keep no matter what came next. The fire crackled and popped in the hearth. Outside, the wind buried the world in snow. And inside the small cabin at the edge of civilization, a human man held the hand of an orc woman and felt the entire course of his life shift like a river changing its channel after a storm. When Grushna finally fell into an exhausted sleep, Paxton carefully extracted his hand from hers and set about making the cabin secure for the night. He barred the door and checked the windows, more out of habit than any real sense of danger. Then he pulled his only other blanket from the chest at the foot of the bed and made himself as comfortable as he could in the rocking chair by the fire. Sleep did not come easily. Every time Grushna stirred or made a sound in her sleep, he jerked awake, afraid that fever had set in or that the wound had reopened. But each time he checked on her, she was just shifting position, her body trying to find comfort despite the injury. In the gray light before dawn, he woke to find her watching him from the bed. Her amber eyes were clear and alert, and some color had returned to her green skin. "You slept in the chair," she said, and he could not read the emotion in her voice. "You needed the bed more than I did," Paxton replied, stretching out the kinks in his back. "How do you feel?" "Like I was stabbed and then stitched back together by a human who probably should have let me die," she said, but there was something almost like humor in her tone. "Well, I did not let you die, so you are stuck with me now," Paxton said, standing and moving to the fire to stoke it back to life. "Are you hungry? I have porridge, and some dried meat, though I am not sure what orcs eat." "Food," Grushna said dryly. "Orcs eat food same as humans." Paxton felt his face heat with embarrassment. "Right, of course. That was a stupid thing to say." "Yes, it was," she agreed, but when he glanced at her, he saw that she was almost smiling, or at least, the corners of her mouth had turned up slightly. He made porridge in the cast iron pot over the fire, adding honey and dried berries to make it more palatable. When it was ready, he filled 2 bowls and brought one to her, helping her sit up against the wall so she could eat. She moved stiffly, obviously in pain, but she managed to prop herself up and take the bowl from him. They ate in silence for a while, the only sounds the crackling of the fire and the clink of their spoons against the wooden bowls. Paxton found himself stealing glances at her, studying her in the morning light. Her dark hair was matted with blood and sweat, her clothes torn and filthy, but there was a dignity in the way she held herself, a pride that had not been broken even by whatever ordeal had brought her to his doorstep. "I should tell you what happened," Grushna said finally, setting her empty bowl aside. "You deserve to know what you have brought into your home." "Only if you want to tell me," Paxton said. "I am not going to force it." She looked at him with those intense amber eyes, and he had the feeling she was weighing him again, trying to understand what kind of man he was. "My clan cast me out," she said at last, her voice flat and emotionless as if she was reporting facts about someone else. 3 days ago. They said I was a traitor to my people. They said I had lost my honor." "What did you do?" Paxton asked. "I refused to kill a human child," Grushna said simply. The words hung in the air between them like a blade. Paxton felt something cold and heavy settle in his stomach. "Tell me," he said quietly. Grushna drew in a long breath and then began to speak, her eyes fixed on the far wall as if she was seeing the events play out there instead of in memory. "There is a war brewing between our peoples," she said. "You must know this. The human settlements push farther into our lands every year. Our hunting grounds shrink. Our sacred places are destroyed. My clan, the Stonefist, decided we would strike back. We would raid the human villages, drive them out, reclaim what was ours." She paused, her jaw working as if she was chewing on something bitter. "I was part of the raiding party. We hit a settlement called Millbrook, 2 days' ride east of here. It was supposed to be a warning, a show of force. Burn some buildings, scatter some livestock, make the humans think twice about staying. But it went wrong. One of our warriors lost control. He broke into a house and found a woman hiding with her daughter. The woman fought him and he killed her. Then he turned on the child. Grushna's hands clenched into fists on top of the blankets. She was maybe 8 years old, blonde hair, blue eyes, terrified. And this warrior, this male from my own clan, he raised his axe to kill her, said she would just grow up to breed more humans anyway, might as well end her now. And I could not let it happen. I could not stand there and watch him murder a child in cold blood. "So what did you do?" Paxton asked, though he thought he already knew the answer. "I stopped him," Grushna said. "I put myself between him and the girl. I told him to walk away. He tried to go through me and we fought. I won. I knocked him unconscious and I took the child to the edge of the settlement and told her to run. And then I went back to my clan and reported what had happened." She laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "I thought they would understand. I thought they would see that there is a line between defending our territory and murdering children. But I was wrong. They called me a traitor. They said I had chosen human life over orc honor. The clan leader, my own uncle, he declared me outcast. He gave the warriors permission to hunt me down if they wanted to, so I ran." Her voice had gone thick with emotion, and she stopped speaking, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "They caught up to me yesterday," she continued after a moment. "3 of them. We fought on a cliff overlooking a frozen river. I killed one and threw another over the edge. The third one, he got me with his knife before I could finish him. I thought I killed him too, but I do not know for certain. I just ran. I did not know where I was going. I just knew I had to get away, had to find somewhere safe. And then I saw your barn and I thought maybe I could hide there until I healed. But I was too weak. I collapsed. And you found me." She finally looked at him, and the vulnerability in her eyes nearly broke his heart. "So now you know," she said. "I am a traitor to my clan, an outcast with a price on my head, and if anyone finds out you are sheltering me, they will kill you too. Orcs and humans alike will want me dead. You should turn me out. It is the smart thing to do." Paxton set his bowl aside and leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his gaze locked with hers. "I am not going to turn you out," he said firmly. "I told you last night that your name is under my protection, and I meant it. I do not care what your clan says or what anyone else thinks. You saved a child's life at the cost of everything you had. That makes you a hero in my eyes, not a traitor." Grushna stared at him, her mouth slightly open in shock. "You are insane," she whispered. "You do not know what you are saying." "I know exactly what I am saying," Paxton replied. "You can stay here as long as you need to. I have room. I have food. Winter is hard in the Greymark, but I have survived 4 of them already, and I can manage another with a guest. When you are healed, if you want to leave, I will not stop you. But until then, this is your home if you want it." "Why?" she asked for the 3rd time, and he realized it was the question at the heart of everything, the question that haunted her. "Because it is the right thing to do," Paxton said simply. "Because I believe people should help each other when they can, regardless of what skin they were born in. And because I think you and I might not be so different. We both ended up out here on the frontier, did we not? Away from our people, trying to build something new. Maybe we are both looking for the same thing." "What is that?" Grushna asked. "A place where we belong," Paxton said. The words seemed to strike her deeply. She looked away, blinking rapidly, and when she spoke again, her voice was rough. "You are a strange man, Paxton Thornwell," she said. "I have been told that before," he replied with a slight smile. "Now you should rest. Your body needs time to heal. I will change your bandages in a few hours and make sure the wound is clean. And then we will figure out what comes next, one day at a time." Grushna nodded slowly and eased herself back down onto the bed. Paxton pulled the blankets up over her, and then returned to his chair by the fire. picking up the book he had been reading the night before, a collection of farming techniques he had borrowed from the trading post on his last supply run. But he found he could not focus on the words. His mind kept drifting to the orc woman in his bed, to the story she had told, to the weight of the promise he had made. He had lived alone for so long that he had almost forgotten what it felt like to have another person in his space, to be responsible for someone besides himself. And yet, it did not feel wrong. If anything, it felt strangely right, as if some empty place inside him that he had not even known existed was slowly being filled. The days that followed fell into a careful rhythm. Paxton tended to Grushna's wound twice daily, cleaning and rebandaging it, checking for signs of infection. She healed quickly, faster than he would have expected, and he remembered hearing that orcs had hardy constitutions, their bodies built to endure hardship. Within a week, she was able to sit up and move around the cabin slowly, though she still tired easily and the wound pulled whenever she moved too quickly. During those long winter days, they talked. At first, the conversations were cautious and superficial, discussing the weather, the quality of the firewood, the state of the food supplies. But gradually, as Grushna's strength returned and as the walls of distrust between them slowly crumbled, they began to share more. Paxton told her about his life before the farm, how he had been a soldier in the territorial militia for 3 years before he could not stomach the violence anymore. He told her about the things he had seen, the battles he had fought, the nightmares that still plagued him sometimes when he slept. He told her about his decision to leave it all behind and come to the frontier, to build something with his hands instead of destroying things with weapons. Grushna, in turn, told him about her life in the Stonefist clan, about the rigid hierarchy and the constant emphasis on strength and honor. She told him about her mother, who had died in childbirth when Grushna was 12, and her father, who had been killed in a skirmish with human raiders when she was 16. She told him about growing up learning to fight, to hunt, to survive in a world that was always hostile, always dangerous. "We are taught from childhood that humans are the enemy," she said one evening as they sat by the fire, sharing a meal of venison stew that Paxton had made from meat he had preserved in the fall. "That you are weak and greedy, and that you will take everything from us if we let you. That the only way to survive is to fight, to be stronger, to never show mercy." "And do you still believe that?" Paxton asked carefully. Grushna looked at him, firelight dancing in her amber eyes. "I do not know what I believe anymore," she admitted. "You have shown me more kindness in 2 weeks than my own clan showed me in a lifetime. How am I supposed to reconcile that with everything I was taught?" "Maybe what you were taught was wrong," Paxton suggested. "Or maybe it was not wrong exactly, but incomplete. People are complicated. Humans can be greedy and cruel, yes. I have seen that with my own eyes. But we can also be kind and generous and brave. I imagine orcs are the same way. Some good, some bad, most of us somewhere in between, just trying to get by." "You make it sound so simple," Grushna said with a faint smile. "It is simple," Paxton replied. "The hard part is getting everyone else to see it." As the weeks passed, Paxton found himself looking forward to those evening conversations more and more. He discovered that Grushna had a sharp wit and a dry sense of humor that caught him off guard and made him laugh in ways he had not laughed in years. She told him stories about her clan, about the foolish things young orc warriors did to prove themselves, about the time one of them got drunk on fermented honey wine and tried to wrestle a bear. "Did he win?" Paxton asked, grinning. "He did not die, if that is what you mean," Grushna replied. "But he spent the next month recovering from his injuries and being mocked by everyone who saw him. We do not let our warriors forget their stupid mistakes." Paxton shared his own stories too, tales of mishaps and accidents from his years as a soldier and then as a farmer. He told her about the time he had accidentally set fire to his first barn because he had not properly banked the coals in the forge, and how he had spent 3 days rebuilding it while his neighbors shook their heads and laughed at him. "You humans are ridiculous," Grushna said, but she was smiling as she said it, and Paxton felt warmth bloom in his chest at the sight of that smile. It was strange how quickly the unusual became normal. Within a month, it felt entirely natural to have Grushna in his cabin, sharing his space, eating meals with him, sitting by the fire in the evenings. She began to help with small tasks as her strength returned, mending his clothes, preparing food, organizing the chaos of his storage shelves. She had a way of moving through the space that was both efficient and graceful, despite her size and strength. One morning, Paxton woke to find her standing at the window, looking out at the snow-covered fields. The early light made her green skin seem to glow, and her profile was striking against the pale winter sky. "Thinking about leaving?" he asked, trying to keep his voice light even though the thought of her walking away made his stomach knot with anxiety. "No," she said quietly. "Thinking about staying?" Paxton sat up in the chair where he still slept each night, giving her the bed. "You are welcome to stay as long as you want," he said. "I meant that." She turned to look at him, her expression serious. "I need to contribute," she said. "I cannot just live here as a guest forever, taking your food and your shelter without giving anything in return. It goes against everything I am." "You have been helping," Paxton pointed out, "and you are still recovering." "I am strong enough now to do real work," Grushna insisted. "Your farm will need attention when spring comes. Let me help you. Let me be useful." Paxton considered this. The truth was, he could use the help. Running a frontier farm alone was brutal work, and there were always tasks he had to put off because he simply did not have enough hours in the day or enough strength in his body. But bringing Grushna outside, making her visible to anyone who might pass by, that carried risks. "People will see you," he said carefully. "If anyone comes to the farm, traders or travelers or neighbors from the other homesteads, they will see you and they will ask questions. Then we tell them the truth," Grushna said, "that I am here to work, that you hired me." "No one is going to believe I hired an orc," Paxton said flatly. "Then tell them I am your servant, your slave. Tell them whatever you need to tell them to make it acceptable," Grushna said, and there was something hard in her voice now, something that made Paxton's heart ache. "I am not going to tell anyone you are my slave," he said firmly. "That is not what you are. You are a free woman and you are my friend, and if anyone has a problem with that, they can take it up with me." Grushna stared at him, and he saw her throat work as she swallowed hard. "You are serious," she said. "Completely serious," Paxton confirmed. "Though I would prefer to avoid trouble if we can, so maybe we just keep you out of sight for now, at least until we know we can trust whoever might come around. The nearest neighbors are miles away, and I do not get many visitors in winter anyway. We should be safe enough." "Safe," Grushna repeated, and she shook her head slowly. "I am starting to forget what that word even means." As winter loosened its grip, and the first signs of spring began to appear, Grushna started working alongside Paxton in earnest. They repaired the barn roof where the snow had damaged some of the shingles, mucked out the animal stalls, and prepared the fields for planting. Grushna was astonishingly strong, able to lift and carry loads that would have taken Paxton 2 or 3 trips, and she worked with a focused intensity that he admired. But it was more than just her physical strength that impressed him. She had a good mind for problem-solving, and she often saw solutions to challenges that he had overlooked. When they were trying to figure out how to reinforce the fence around the chicken coop to keep out foxes, She suggested a design that used interlocking logs and wire in a way that was both strong and efficient. When they were planning the crop rotation for the fields, she pointed out that they should plant beans in the section that had held wheat last year, because beans would replenish the soil. "How do you know that?" Paxton asked, surprised. "We grow crops too," Grushna said with a hint of amusement. "Orcs are not just warriors and raiders. We farm. We build. We have societies and families and all the things humans have. You just never see that side of us." "I am starting to," Paxton said quietly, and when their eyes met, he felt something pass between them, some understanding that went deeper than words. They developed a comfortable partnership, working side by side from dawn until dusk, falling into an easy rhythm where they did not always need to speak to know what the other was thinking. Paxton found himself noticing small things about her. The way she hummed under her breath when she was concentrating, the way she tilted her head when she was considering a problem, the way her eyes lit up when she laughed. He tried not to think about what those observations meant, tried to tell himself that he was just grateful for the help, for the companionship. But late at night, lying in his chair by the dying fire while she slept in the bed, he found his thoughts drifting to her more and more. He remembered the feeling of her hand in his that first night, the weight of her trust when she let him treat her wound, the sound of her laugh when he said something that amused her. He was falling for her, he realized with a mixture of wonder and dread. He was falling for an orc woman, and he had absolutely no idea what to do about it. The revelation came to a head one evening in early spring when they were washing dishes after supper. Paxton was drying while Grushna washed, their hands occasionally brushing as they passed bowls and plates back and forth. It was a domestic scene, simple and ordinary, and yet Paxton felt his heart racing in his chest, his skin hyper-aware of every accidental touch. "I have been thinking," Grushna said suddenly, breaking the silence. "About what?" Paxton asked, focusing very hard on drying the bowl in his hands. "About what happens next," she said. "Spring is here. The roads will be passable soon, traders will start coming through. You will need to go to the settlements for supplies, and I will need to decide what I am going to do." Paxton felt something cold settle in his stomach. "You are thinking about leaving," he said, trying to keep his voice neutral. "I am thinking that I cannot hide here forever," Grushna replied. "As much as I might want to." "Do you want to?" Paxton asked, turning to look at her. She met his gaze, and he saw conflict in her amber eyes, a storm of emotions that she was struggling to contain. "Yes," she admitted, "I do. This place, these months with you, it has been the first time in my life that I felt like I could just exist without constantly fighting or proving myself or living up to impossible standards. You make me feel safe, Paxton, and more than that, you make me feel seen. Like I am a person, not just a weapon or a problem or a traitor." Her voice broke on the last word, and Paxton set down the bowl and the towel and turned to face her fully. "You are a person," he said firmly. "You are intelligent and strong and brave and kind. You saved a child's life when everyone else told you to let her die. You have worked harder than anyone I have ever known to build a life here. And you are my friend, Grushna, maybe my best friend if I am being honest. I do not want you to leave. But I cannot stay forever as your friend and farmhand," Grushna said, and there was something raw and painful in her expression now. "People will find out eventually, and when they do, you will be judged for sheltering me. You could lose everything you have built here. Your neighbors will turn on you. The authorities might even arrest you for harboring an orc. I cannot let that happen. I care about you too much to let my presence destroy your life." The words hung between them like a confession, and Paxton felt his heart hammering so hard he thought it might burst through his ribs. "You care about me," he repeated, and his voice came out rough and unsteady. Grushna looked away, her green cheeks darkening with what he realized was a blush. "Yes," she said quietly, "I do. More than I should, more than is wise. You have shown me what it means to be treated with kindness and respect, and I do not think I can go back to a world where that does not exist. But I also cannot ask you to sacrifice everything for me. It would not be fair." Paxton stepped closer to her, close enough that he could see the individual scars on her arms, the faint lines around her eyes that crinkled when she smiled. Close enough that he could smell the soap on her skin and see the way her pulse jumped in her throat. "What if I want to sacrifice everything?" he asked. "What if I told you that none of it matters, not the farm, not the neighbors, not what anyone else thinks, if it means you have to leave?" Grushna looked at him with wide eyes, her lips parted in shock. "Paxton, you cannot mean that," she whispered. "I mean it," he said, and he reached up slowly, giving her time to pull away, and touched her cheek with his palm. Her skin was warm and slightly rough, and he felt her tremble at the contact. "I mean it because I have fallen in love with you, Grushna. Somewhere between pulling you out of the snow and learning how to make you laugh, I fell completely and irrevocably in love with you. And I do not care what that makes me in the eyes of the world. All I care about is that you stay." Tears spilled down her cheeks, and she let out a shaky breath that was half laugh, half sob. "You are insane," she said, but there was no heat in the words, only wonder. "You have said that before," Paxton replied with a slight smile. "I am starting to think you might be right." "I love you too," Grushna said, and her voice cracked on the words. "I have tried not to. I have tried to convince myself that it is just gratitude or loneliness or anything else. But it is not. I love you, Paxton Thornwell, and I do not know what to do about it." "I have an idea," Paxton said, and he leaned in and kissed her. It was awkward at first, their mouths not quite fitting together properly, her tusks getting in the way. But they adjusted, tilting their heads and finding the angle that worked, and then it was perfect. She tasted like the tea they had drunk with dinner, sweet and herbal, and her lips were softer than he had expected. When she kissed him back, tentatively at first and then with growing confidence, he felt like his entire body was on fire, every nerve ending alight with sensation. They broke apart eventually, both breathing hard, and Grushna rested her forehead against his. "This is madness," she whispered. "Probably," Paxton agreed. "But I do not care, do you?" "No," she said, and she started laughing, a sound of pure joy that made his heart soar. "No, I do not care at all." They stood there in the kitchen, holding each other, and Paxton felt a sense of rightness settle over him, a certainty that this was exactly where he was supposed to be, with exactly the person he was supposed to be with. But the world, as it always does, had other plans. The trouble came a week later, on a warm spring morning when the air smelled of growing things and new beginnings. Paxton was in the barn, feeding the horses, when he heard the sound of hoofbeats approaching the farm. Multiple horses moving fast. His stomach dropped. He glanced toward the cabin and saw Grushna standing in the doorway, her body tense, her eyes scanning the tree line. She had heard them too. "Get inside," Paxton called to her. "Hide in the cellar. Now." She hesitated for only a moment, then nodded and disappeared inside. Paxton wiped his hands on his trousers and walked out to meet whoever was coming, his mind racing through possible explanations, possible excuses, possible ways to protect her. 5 riders emerged from the trees and into the clearing around his cabin. They wore the rough leather and fur clothing typical of frontier settlers, and they all carried weapons openly, rifles and axes and long knives. Paxton recognized 2 of them, Marcus Thorne, who owned the homestead about 8 miles north, and his brother Daniel Thorne. The other 3 were strangers, hard-looking men with cold eyes. Marcus pulled his horse to a stop a dozen yards from Paxton and looked down at him with an expression of grim determination. "Paxton Thornwell," Marcus said, and his voice carried across the yard. "We need to talk to you about something serious, Marcus," Paxton said evenly, keeping his hands visible and empty. "What brings you all the way out here?" "We are looking for an orc," Marcus said bluntly. "A female. There is a bounty on her head. Word came from the territorial marshal last week. She is wanted for the murder of orc warriors and for interfering with clan justice. She was last seen heading west into this area. You seen anything?" Paxton felt his blood turn to ice, but he kept his expression neutral. "An orc woman," he said, making his voice sound puzzled. "No, I have not seen any orcs. Been a quiet winter, mostly just me and the chickens." One of the strangers, a tall man with a scarred face, urged his horse forward. "You sure about that?" he asked, his tone openly skeptical. "Because we have been tracking her for days, and the trail led straight to this area, and you are the only homestead within miles." "I am telling you I have not seen her," Paxton said firmly. "Maybe she went around my land. There is a lot of wilderness out here. Mind if we take a look around?" Marcus asked, and there was something apologetic in his tone but also something unyielding. "Just to be sure. You understand this orc is dangerous. She killed 3 warriors. If she is hiding somewhere nearby, folks need to know." "I do mind, actually," Paxton said, stepping forward and planting his feet. "This is my property, and I do not appreciate armed men showing up and demanding to search it. If you want to look around, you will need a warrant from the marshal, and last I checked, we were too far out in the frontier for that kind of legal formality to mean much. So I am going to ask you politely to turn around and leave." The tension ratcheted up instantly. The 5 men exchanged glances, and Paxton saw hands drift toward weapons. Marcus held up a hand to forestall any violence. "Paxton, do not be stupid about this," Marcus said. "We are not your enemies. We are just trying to keep people safe. If this orc is as dangerous as they say, you could be in danger too." "I can take care of myself," Paxton said coldly. "Now get off my land." The scarred stranger laughed, a harsh, unpleasant sound. "He is hiding her," he said to the others. "Has to be. No one gets this defensive unless they have got something to hide." "I am not hiding anyone," Paxton said, but he could hear the strain in his own voice, could feel the lie sitting heavy on his tongue. "Then you will not mind if we look," the scarred man said, and he started to dismount. Paxton moved faster than he would have thought possible. He grabbed the pitchfork leaning against the barn wall and leveled it at the man, the metal tines glinting in the sunlight. "I said get off my land," Paxton repeated, and his voice was hard as stone. "I will defend my property. Test me if you want." The clearing erupted into chaos. The 5 men all drew weapons, rifles coming up to aim at Paxton, and he knew with absolute certainty that he was about to die. But before anyone could fire, the cabin door slammed open and Grushna strode out, and every head turned toward her. She was magnificent and terrifying in equal measure. She had armed herself with Paxton's old militia sword, the blade catching the light as she held it at her side. Her amber eyes blazed with barely controlled fury, and her tusks were bared in an expression that was pure predatory threat. "You want me," she called out, her voice ringing across the yard. "Here I am. Leave him out of this." "Grushna, no," Paxton started to say, but she silenced him with a sharp gesture. "This is my fight, not yours," she said, never taking her eyes off the riders. "You have done enough. More than enough. I will not let you die for me." Marcus stared at her with a mixture of shock and fear. "You are her," he said. "The orc from the bounty notice." "I am," Grushna confirmed. "And yes, I killed 3 orc warriors who were trying to murder me for refusing to let a child die. I am not ashamed of that. If you want to collect the bounty, come and try, but you should know that I will not go quietly." The scarred man grinned, a vicious expression. "Oh, I was hoping you would say that," he said, and he raised his rifle. Paxton did not think. He threw himself forward, putting his body between Grushna and the weapon, and he heard her scream his name. The rifle cracked, deafeningly loud in the quiet morning, and Paxton felt a line of fire across his shoulder as the bullet grazed him. He stumbled but did not fall, and Grushna was there, grabbing him and pulling him back toward the cabin. "Everybody stop," Marcus shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. "Hold your fire." The scarred man looked at him in disbelief. "What are you talking about? She is right there." "We can take her." "I said hold your fire," Marcus repeated, and there was authority in his voice now, the voice of someone who was used to being obeyed. He looked at Paxton and Grushna, his expression troubled. "Paxton, what in the name of all that is holy are you doing?" "You threw yourself in front of a bullet for an orc." "For her," Paxton corrected, his shoulder bleeding but the pain distant and unimportant. "Her name is Grushna, and yes, I would take a bullet for her. I would take 100 bullets for her if I had to. She is under my protection, Marcus." "I am not letting you take her. She is a fugitive," one of the other strangers said, "and you are harboring her. That makes you a criminal too." "Then I guess I am a criminal," Paxton said flatly. "I do not care. You want to arrest me, fine, arrest me, but you are not touching her." Marcus dismounted slowly and walked toward them, his hands carefully away from his weapons. Paxton tensed, but the older man stopped a safe distance away and studied them both with thoughtful eyes. "Tell me what happened," Marcus said quietly. "The real story. Not the bounty notice, not the rumors." "What actually happened?" Grushna hesitated, then began to speak. She told them everything, the same story she had told Paxton that first morning, about the raid and the child and her decision to protect the innocent and the price she had paid for it. Her voice was steady and clear, and she did not flinch from the weight of their stares. When she finished, silence stretched across the yard. The 5 men looked at each other, uncertainty written on their faces. "You expect us to believe that?" the scarred man scoffed. "Orcs do not save human children, they kill them." "This one did," Paxton said fiercely. "And she paid for it with everything she had. Her clan, her family, her home. She lost it all because she chose to do the right thing. And when she showed up here bleeding and dying, I chose to help her because that is what decent people do. They help each other. Not because of what skin color they have or what species they belong to, but because it is the right thing to do." His words rang out in the still morning air, and he saw some of the men shift uncomfortably. "I know what you all think of me," Paxton continued. "Crazy Paxton, the hermit who lives out on the edge of nowhere, talking to his chickens and avoiding civilization. But I am telling you now, I am not crazy. I am in love with this woman, and if you want to take her away, you are going to have to go through me to do it." Marcus stared at him for a long moment, then let out a long breath. "You are in love with her," he repeated. "An orc." "Yes," Paxton said simply. "I am." Marcus turned to his brother Daniel. "What do you think?" Daniel, who had been silent up to this point, shrugged. "I think this is the damnedest thing I have ever seen," he said. "But I also think Paxton is a good man. I have known him for years. He helped us rebuild our barn after the storm 2 summers ago, did not ask for anything in return. If he says she is not a threat, I believe him." "She killed 3 orcs," the scarred man protested. "The bounty is 50 gold pieces. We are just going to walk away from that." "Yes," Marcus said firmly. "We are. Because I did not sign up to hunt down someone who saved a child's life. As far as I am concerned, that makes her a hero, not a criminal. And if the territorial marshal has a problem with that, he can come out here and deal with it himself." He turned back to Paxton and Grushna. "But you need to understand something," he said seriously. "This is going to cause trouble. Word will get out. Other bounty hunters will come. And not all of them are going to be as reasonable as we are. You need to be prepared for that." "We will be," Paxton said. "Thank you, Marcus, for listening." Marcus nodded curtly, then swung back up onto his horse. "Come on," he said to his group. "We are done here." The scarred man started to protest, but Daniel cut him off. "He said we are done," Daniel said coldly. "Now mount up." The 5 riders turned and rode back into the trees, leaving Paxton and Grushna standing in the yard. As soon as they were out of sight, Paxton's legs gave out and he sat down hard on the ground, his shoulder throbbing with pain. "You idiot," Grushna said, kneeling beside him, her hands shaking as she examined the wound. "You beautiful, brave, idiotic man, you could have been killed." "So could you," Paxton replied. "And I told you your name is under my protection. That means I stand between you and anyone who wants to hurt you." She pressed her forehead to his, her tears falling onto his face. "I do not deserve you," she whispered. "Yes, you do," Paxton said firmly. "Now help me inside so you can patch me up. I have experience with this, remember. I am very good at getting hurt and then stitching myself back together." She laughed through her tears and helped him to his feet, and together they limped back to the cabin. The days following the confrontation were tense. Paxton and Grushna both knew that Marcus had been right, that more trouble was coming. They prepared as best they could, stockpiling supplies, reinforcing the cabin's defenses, and making plans for what they would do if another group of bounty hunters arrived. But as the days turned into weeks and no one came, they began to relax slightly. Spring was in full bloom now, the fields green and growing, the animals healthy and producing. They worked the farm together, falling back into the comfortable rhythm they had established before, though now there was a new dimension to their relationship, a physical closeness that had not been there before. They no longer slept separately. Grushna had insisted that if they were facing danger together, they should at least be comfortable while doing it, and Paxton was not about to argue. They shared the bed, wrapped in each other's arms, and Paxton marveled at how perfectly they fit together, how natural it felt to fall asleep with her heartbeat against his chest. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and gold, Grushna broke the comfortable silence. "I have been thinking," she said. "Dangerous habit," Paxton teased gently. She elbowed him lightly in the ribs. "I have been thinking about what you said to Marcus," she continued. "About being in love with me, about protecting me. And I want you to know that it goes both ways. I will protect you too, Paxton, with everything I am. If anyone ever tries to hurt you because of me, I will tear them apart." "I believe you," Paxton said, covering her hand with his. "Though I hope it does not come to that. I would much rather we just live here in peace, growing vegetables and raising chickens and being boring." "Boring sounds wonderful," Grushna agreed. Then she paused and he felt her tense slightly. "Paxton, can I ask you something?" "Anything," he said. "What happens next?" she asked. "I mean long term. We cannot just pretend the rest of the world does not exist forever. Eventually people will come, questions will be asked, and we will need to have answers." Paxton had been thinking about this too, late at night when sleep would not come. He had turned the problem over in his mind from every angle, looking for a solution that would keep them both safe and together. "I have an idea," he said slowly. "It is a little crazy, but then again, people already think I am crazy, so maybe it will work." "Tell me," Grushna said. "We make it official," Paxton said. "We tell people that you are my wife." Grushna went very still. "Your wife," she repeated, her voice carefully neutral. "Yes," Paxton said, turning to face her fully. "Think about it. If we are married, it gives you a legal claim to be here. It makes you part of my household, my family. It is not much protection, but it is something. And more than that, it is the truth. I want to spend my life with you, Grushna. I want to wake up next to you every morning and go to sleep next to you every night. I want to build something permanent with you, something that cannot be taken away just because other people do not understand it. Humans and orcs do not marry each other, Grushna said, but he could hear the hope creeping into her voice. It is forbidden by both our peoples. So we will be the first, Paxton said. We will show everyone that it can be done, that love does not care about species or skin color, or any of the other stupid things people used to divide themselves. What do you say? Will you marry me, Grushna? She stared at him for a long moment, her amber eyes shining with tears. Then she lunged at him, wrapping her arms around him so tightly he could barely breathe, and she kissed him with such fierce joy that he forgot to be nervous about her answer. Yes, she said when they finally broke apart. Yes, 1,000 times yes, I will marry you, Paxton Thornwell. They held each other on the porch as the stars came out overhead, and Paxton felt a profound sense of peace settle over him. Whatever came next, whatever challenges they would face them together. And that made all the difference. The wedding took place a month later, in early summer when the world was at its most beautiful and alive. They had debated about whether to invite anyone, whether to make it a public declaration or keep it private, and in the end, they had decided on a middle path. They invited Marcus and Daniel Thorne, the only humans Paxton trusted to witness the ceremony without causing trouble, and they sent word through careful channels to a few of Grushna's old friends from her clan, orcs who had disagreed with the decision to cast her out. To Paxton's surprise and delight, 3 orcs actually came. They arrived at dawn on the morning of the wedding, 3 warriors who approached the farm with weapons sheathed and hands open in a gesture of peace. Grushna wept when she saw them, running to embrace them, and Paxton stood back and watched as she reunited with people who had known her before, who had been part of her old life. One of them, a grizzled older orc named Thraka, approached Paxton with a stern expression. "You are the human who claimed her?" he asked bluntly. "I am," Paxton said, meeting the orc's eyes steadily. "And I intend to spend the rest of my life making sure she knows she is valued and loved." Thraka studied him for a long moment, then grunted. "Good," he said. "She deserves that." The clan was wrong to cast her out. Some of us tried to speak up, but we were not strong enough to change minds. But we are here now. And if anyone tries to harm her or you, they will have to answer to us. "Thank you," Paxton said, and he meant it with his whole heart. The ceremony itself was a blend of human and orc traditions, cobbled together from what Paxton remembered of human weddings and what Grushna described of orc bonding rituals. They stood together in the field behind the cabin, surrounded by their small group of witnesses, and they exchanged vows they had written themselves. "I promise to stand with you in all things," Paxton said, holding both of Grushna's hands in his. "In joy and in sorrow, in plenty and in want. I promise to see you, to value you, to love you for exactly who you are. From today and forever, your name is under my protection, and my heart is yours." Grushna's voice trembled as she spoke her vows. "I promise to be your partner and your equal," she said. "To work beside you, to fight beside you, to build a life with you that is worth living. I promise to trust you with my heart, even though it terrifies me. I promise to love you with everything I am, for as long as we both draw breath." Marcus, acting as officiant, cleared his throat gruffly. "Then by the authority vested in me by absolutely no one, I declare you husband and wife," he said. "Paxton, you may kiss your bride." And Paxton did, pulling Grushna into his arms and kissing her as their friends cheered and clapped. It was imperfect and strange and absolutely wonderful. and when they broke apart, both of them were grinning like fools. They celebrated with a feast that evening, sharing food and drink and stories as the sun set, and the fireflies came out to dance in the warm summer air. The orcs told tales of Grushna's childhood, of her bravery and stubbornness even as a young warrior, and Paxton learned things about his wife that made him love her even more. Marcus and Daniel shared stories about Paxton's early days on the frontier, about his determination to make the farm work despite having no idea what he was doing, and Grushna laughed until she cried at the image of him trying to chase down a runaway cow in his underwear. As the night grew late and their guests began to settle down to sleep in the barn and around the fire, Paxton and Grushna slipped away to the cabin. Inside, with the door closed and the rest of the world shut out, they stood together in the firelight and simply looked at each other. "We did it," Grushna said softly. "We are really married." "We are," Paxton agreed. "How does it feel?" "Right," she said. "It feels right. You feel right. All of this feels like something I have been looking for my whole life without knowing what it was." "I know exactly what you mean," Paxton said, and he drew her close and kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. "I love you, wife." "I love you too, husband," she whispered, and the word felt like a promise, like a vow, like the beginning of everything they would build together. They made love that night with a tenderness and passion that took Paxton's breath away, learning each other's bodies, discovering what brought pleasure and what made the other gasp and cry out. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the bed, sweaty and satisfied and completely content, and Paxton traced idle patterns on the green skin of her shoulder. "No regrets?" he asked quietly. "None," Grushna said firmly. "You, not a single one," Paxton replied. The summer passed in a blur of hard work and quiet happiness. Their guests departed after a few days, promising to spread the word among friendly orcs that Grushna was safe and protected, and to discourage anyone who might still be thinking about the bounty. Marcus and Daniel went back to their homestead with instructions to tell anyone who asked that Paxton had taken a wife, and that she was a strong worker who kept to herself. And yes, she was an orc, and no, that was not anyone else's business. To Paxton's relief and surprise, the reaction from the human community was more muted than he had feared. A few neighbors stopped by over the following weeks, ostensibly to trade or borrow tools, but really to get a look at the orc woman who had married Paxton Thornwell. Most of them were wary but not hostile, and when they saw Grushna working in the fields or tending the animals, saw the easy way she and Paxton moved around each other, the obvious affection between them, some of the wariness faded. One older woman, Eliza Jameson from a homestead to the south, brought them a basket of preserves and bread as a wedding gift. "I heard you got married," she said to Paxton, eyeing Grushna with open curiosity. "Congratulations." "Thank you," Paxton said, surprised by the gesture. Eliza turned to Grushna. "You take care of him, you hear," she said. "Paxton is a good man. Do not let him work himself to death trying to prove something." Grushna blinked, clearly taken aback by the directness, then nodded slowly. "I will," she promised. "Good," Eliza said with a firm nod. Then she turned and left, and Paxton and Grushna stood in the yard staring after her in amazement. "Did that really just happen?" Grushna asked. "I think it did," Paxton said, shaking his head in disbelief. "Maybe the world is changing faster than we thought." "Or maybe people are just tired of fighting," Grushna suggested. "Maybe they are ready to try something different." As autumn arrived, and the leaves began to turn gold and red, Paxton and Grushna harvested their crops and prepared for the coming winter. The yield was better than Paxton had ever managed on his own, and he knew it was because of Grushna's help, her strength and knowledge and tireless work ethic. They stored away food and firewood, repaired the cabin's roof, and made sure all the animals were healthy and ready for the cold months ahead. One crisp October evening, as they sat by the fire after a long day of work, Grushna placed a hand on her stomach with a strange expression on her face. "What is it?" Paxton asked, immediately concerned. "Are you feeling sick?" "No," Grushna said slowly. "Not sick, just different. Paxton, I think I might be pregnant." The words hung in the air between them, huge and impossible and wonderful. Paxton stared at her, his mind struggling to process what she had just said. "Pregnant," he repeated. "You think you are pregnant with a child, our child." "I know it seems impossible," Grushna said, her hand still resting on her stomach. "Humans and orcs are not supposed to be able to have children together, but I have all the signs. The nausea in the mornings, the changes in my body, the way my senses are sharper. I am almost certain." Paxton crossed the space between them in 2 strides and dropped to his knees in front of her, placing his hands over hers on her stomach. "A child," he said, and his voice came out choked with emotion. "Grushna, we are going to have a child." She started crying, tears of joy and fear and overwhelming emotion streaming down her face. "I am terrified," she admitted. "What if something goes wrong? What if the baby is not healthy? What if people try to take it away from us? We will protect it," Paxton said fiercely. "Just like I protect you. Just like you protect me. We will love this child and raise it and teach it to be strong and kind, and we will not let anyone tell us that it should not exist. Do you hear me? This child is a miracle, and we are going to cherish it." Grushna pulled him up onto the bench beside her and buried her face in his shoulder, and he held her while she cried, while he cried, while they both processed the enormity of what was coming. The pregnancy was not easy. Grushna struggled with sickness and fatigue in the early months, and as her body changed, she became frustrated with her inability to work as hard as she was used to. Paxton did his best to pick up the slack, but he also made sure she rested and ate well and did not push herself too hard. He read every book he could find about pregnancy and childbirth, and he sent messages to Thraka and the other friendly orcs, asking for advice about orc pregnancies. The responses he got back were encouraging. Orc pregnancies were generally shorter than human ones, lasting about 7 months instead of 9, but the births were usually straightforward and the babies hearty. Grushna's symptoms were normal, and as long as she stayed healthy and strong, she and the baby should both be fine. Winter came, and as the snow fell and the world turned white and silent, Grushna's belly grew round and full. Paxton found himself talking to the baby sometimes when Grushna was asleep, telling it stories about its mother, about how brave and strong and beautiful she was, about how much they both already loved it. In the deepest part of winter, when the snow was piled high outside and the fire crackled cheerfully in the hearth, Grushna went into labor. Paxton had prepared as best he could, boiling water and laying out clean cloths and blankets, but nothing could have truly prepared him for the reality of it, the hours of pain and effort, the terrifying moments when he thought something was going wrong, the incredible strength his wife showed as she brought their child into the world. And then, just as the sun was rising on a clear cold morning, their baby was born. A daughter with green skin a shade lighter than her mother's, tiny tusks just barely visible, and human-looking eyes that were a deep blue-gray like Paxton's. She came into the world screaming her fury at being evicted from her warm, comfortable home, and both her parents burst into tears at the sound. "She is perfect," Grushna whispered, cradling the baby against her chest. "Look at her, Paxton. She is perfect." "She is," Paxton agreed, his voice thick with emotion. He reached out a finger and marveled when his daughter wrapped her tiny hand around it, gripping with surprising strength. "Hello, little one. Welcome to the world. They named her Alara after Paxton's mother who had died when he was young. Alara Thornwell, the first child of human and orc to be born in living memory, and as far as Paxton was concerned, the most precious thing in all the world. The first few weeks with a newborn were exhausting and wonderful in equal measure. Alara was a demanding baby, wanting to be fed and held and attended to at all hours, but neither Paxton nor Grushna minded. They took turns walking her around the cabin when she cried, sang to her, told her stories, marveled at every little thing she did. Word of the baby's birth spread quickly through the frontier community, carried by traders and travelers, and the reaction was mixed. Some people were horrified, calling the child an abomination, a crime against nature. But others were curious, and a few were even supportive. Eliza Jameson showed up with more gifts, this time baby clothes that she had knit herself, and she held Alara with the practiced ease of someone who had raised children of her own. "She is beautiful," Eliza said, gazing down at the sleeping baby. "And anyone who says otherwise is a fool. This little girl is going to change the world someday. You mark my words." Thraka and the other orc friends came to visit as well, bringing gifts from the orc clans, warrior charms to protect the baby, carved toys, soft furs for warmth. Thraka held Alara with a gentleness that seemed at odds with his fierce appearance, and when he handed her back to Grushna, there were tears in his eyes. "She is the bridge between our peoples," he said. "Proof that we do not have to be enemies. Raise her well, Grushna. Teach her both her heritages. She will need to be strong." "I will," Grushna promised. As the months passed and Alara grew, Paxton and Grushna settled into their new life as parents. The farm thrived under their joint care, and they became known throughout the region as the unusual couple who had managed to make an impossible thing work. Some people still shunned them, still muttered about the unnatural union and the half-breed child, but more and more, they found acceptance. One spring day, when Alara was almost a year old and toddling around the cabin on unsteady legs, a rider arrived at the farm. He wore the uniform of the territorial marshal's office, and Paxton felt his stomach drop with dread as the man dismounted. "Paxton Thornwell?" the marshal asked. "That is me," Paxton said, moving to stand between the marshal and the cabin where Grushna was watching through the window with Alara in her arms. "I am Marshal Raymond Pierce. I am here to speak with you about an orc woman named Grushna," the marshal said, his expression unreadable. "She is my wife," Paxton said firmly, "and if you are here to arrest her or collect some bounty, you are going to have a fight on your hands." "Easy," the marshal said, holding up his hands. "I am not here to arrest anyone. I am here to deliver news. The bounty on Grushna has been officially withdrawn. The orc clans and the territorial government have been in negotiations for the past year, trying to establish a peace treaty. As part of those negotiations, all outstanding bounties on orcs accused of crimes against other orcs have been dropped. She is free, Thornwell. No one is hunting her anymore." Paxton felt his knees go weak with relief. "Are you serious?" he asked. "She is really free, she is," the marshal confirmed. "More than that, her case has become something of a rallying point for those who want peace between our peoples. There are people in the government who think what she did, saving that human child, shows that orcs are capable of compassion and honor. They want to meet her. They want to hold her up as an example of what cooperation could look like." "And what does Grushna want?" came a voice from behind Paxton, and he turned to see his wife standing in the doorway, Alara on her hip. "Does anyone care what I want?" The marshal looked at her, and to his credit he did not flinch or show fear. "What do you want?" he asked respectfully. Grushna looked at Paxton, then back at the marshal. "I want to be left alone to raise my family in peace," she said. I do not want to be anyone's symbol or example. I just want to live my life with my husband and my daughter. Is that too much to ask? No, the marshal said. It is not. And I will make sure that message is delivered. But I think you should know that what you have done here, building a life with Paxton, having a child together, it matters to people. It gives them hope that maybe things can be different, that maybe we do not have to keep fighting forever. Grushna was quiet for a moment, considering his words. Then she nodded slowly. Hope is good, she said, but it is not my responsibility to carry it for everyone else. I have my own life to live. Fair enough, the marshal said. He tipped his hat to them both. I will leave you to it then. Congratulations on your family, by the way. Your daughter is beautiful. Thank you, Paxton and Grushna said in unison, and they watched as the marshal mounted his horse and rode away. When he was gone, Grushna turned to Paxton with tears in her eyes. It is really over, she whispered. I am free. You are free, Paxton confirmed, pulling her and Alara into his arms. We all are. They stood there together, the three of them, a family forged from impossible circumstances and held together by love stronger than any prejudice or law. Around them, the farm stretched out green and growing, the fields ready for planting, the animals healthy and content, the cabin warm and solid and safe. The years that followed were not always easy. There were still people who hated what Paxton and Grushna represented, who tried to cause trouble or spread rumors or make their lives difficult. But there were also people who supported them, who saw in their family a vision of what the future could be. Slowly, painfully, the world began to change. More human orc couples began to form, emboldened by Paxton and Grushna's example. The peace treaty between the orcs and humans was signed and held. Trade routes opened up. Orc and human children played together in the settlements. It was not perfect, and there were still conflicts and misunderstandings, but it was progress. Alara grew into a strong, clever child who inherited her mother's physical strength and her father's gentle heart. She learned to work the farm alongside her parents, to read and write in both human and orcish languages, to move between both cultures with ease. She became a bridge, just as Thraka had predicted, and she wore that responsibility with grace. When Alara was 5 years old, Grushna gave birth to a son, a boy they named Torin after Paxton's grandfather. Torin had more human features than his sister, with lighter skin and no visible tusks, but he had his mother's amber eyes and pointed ears. He was quieter than Alara, more thoughtful, but no less loved. On a warm summer evening, when the sun was setting and painting the sky in brilliant colors, Paxton sat on the porch of the cabin he had built, watching his children play in the yard while his wife sat beside him, her hand in his. He thought about that night 7 years ago when he had found Grushna bleeding in the snow and all the choices he had made since then, all the risks he had taken, all the fears he had overcome. You ever regret it? Grushna asked quietly, as if she had been reading his thoughts. Taking me in. Marrying me. Everything that came after. Paxton turned to look at her, this fierce, beautiful woman who had changed his life in ways he could never have imagined, and he smiled. Not for a single moment, he said. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Grushna, you and our children. This life we have built together, I would do it all again in a heartbeat. Even the part where you got shot, she asked, her lips quirking in amusement. Even that, Paxton confirmed, though I would prefer not to repeat it if possible. Grushna laughed, that wonderful sound that never failed to make his heart soar, and she leaned her head on his shoulder. I love you, Paxton Thornwell, she said, more than I ever thought I could love anyone. I love you too, he replied, wrapping his arm around her. And from today until the end of my days, your name will always be under my protection. And mine will always protect yours. Grushna said, completing the vow they had made to each other so many years ago. They sat together in the fading light, watching their children play, listening to the sounds of the farm around them. And they knew with absolute certainty that they were exactly where they belonged. The world had tried to tell them that their love was impossible, that it should not exist, that it was wrong and unnatural and doomed to fail. But they had proven the world wrong. They had built something beautiful and lasting and true, and no one could take that away from them. Not the bounty hunters or the prejudice or the people who refused to understand. Nothing could break what they had forged together in this little cabin at the edge of the frontier. As the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, Alara ran up to the porch, her face flushed and happy. "Papa, Mama, come play with us," she begged. "Torin and I want to show you the fort we built." Paxton and Grushna exchanged a glance, then stood and allowed their daughter to take their hands and lead them into the yard. Torin was indeed building an impressive structure out of fallen branches and twine, his small face serious with concentration. When he saw his parents approaching, he broke into a huge smile. "Look what I made," he said proudly. "It is a castle to keep us safe." "It is wonderful," Grushna said, crouching down to examine his work. "But you do not need a castle to keep you safe, little one. You have your family for that." "And family is stronger than any castle," Paxton added, ruffling his son's hair. They spent the rest of the evening playing with their children, building elaborate fortifications and staging mock battles, and laughing until their sides hurt. When the children finally tired and asked to go inside for their bedtime story, Paxton carried Torin while Grushna carried Alara, and they put them both to bed with kisses and whispered words of love. Later that night, lying in their own bed with Grushna curled against his side, Paxton found himself thinking about the future, about what their children would grow up to do, what kind of world they would inherit, whether the peace that had been so hard won would last. "What are you thinking about?" Grushna murmured sleepily. "Tomorrow," Paxton said, "and the day after that, and all the days we will get to spend together." "That is a lot of days," Grushna said. "Not nearly enough," Paxton replied, and he meant it with every fiber of his being. They fell asleep like that, wrapped in each other's arms, safe and warm and loved. And outside, the world kept turning, carrying them forward into whatever future awaited. But whatever came, whatever challenges or joys or sorrows, they would face it together, because they were family. Because they had chosen each other against all odds and all logic. Because love, real love, the kind that changes hearts and minds and the very fabric of the world, is stronger than any force that tries to destroy it. And in a small cabin on the edge of the frontier, in the warmth and light and laughter of a home built by two people who refused to accept the limits others tried to place on them, that love burned bright and steady and eternal, a beacon for anyone brave enough to follow their example. The story of Paxton and Grushna became legend in the years that followed, passed down through generations as a tale of courage and compassion, and the power of love to transcend the boundaries that divide us. People told it to their children and grandchildren, and each time it was told, it inspired someone new to look beyond what they had been taught, to question the prejudices they had inherited, to reach across the divide and offer a hand to someone who was supposed to be their enemy. And while Paxton and Grushna themselves never sought fame or recognition for what they had done, never positioned themselves as leaders or revolutionaries, their simple act of choosing love over fear rippled outward in ways they could never have predicted, changing the world one heart at a time. Years later, when Paxton was old and gray and his body was bent from a lifetime of hard work, he would sit on that same porch with Grushna beside him, her skin still green but lined now with age, and they would watch their grandchildren playing in the same yard where their own children had played. And Paxton would remember that night in the snow, the moment when he made the choice to help instead of turning away, and he would know with absolute certainty that it had been the best decision of his entire life. "No regrets," Grushna would say, reading his expression the way she always could. "No regrets," Paxton would agree, and they would sit together in the golden afternoon light, hands clasped, hearts full, grateful beyond words for every moment they had been given, every sunrise and sunset, every laugh and tear and ordinary day of their extraordinary life together. Because in the end, that was what it all came down to. Not grand gestures or dramatic rescues or world-changing acts of heroism, though those had their place, but rather the quiet, steady choice to love someone fully and completely, to stand beside them no matter what the cost, to build a life together one day at a time, one moment at a time, one choice at a time. From the day Paxton had told Grushna that her name was under his protection, he had kept that promise. Through danger and doubt, through joy and sorrow, through the long years of building a life and raising a family, he had stood by her side. And she had stood by his, equally fierce, equally devoted, equally committed to the impossible thing they had created together. Their love had been tested by fire and emerged stronger for it. And in the end, when they were both old and their time was coming to its natural close, they could look back on the life they had built and know that it had all been worth it. Every struggle, every sacrifice, every moment of fear or doubt or pain, all of it had led them to this place of profound peace and contentment. And on a quiet autumn evening, when the leaves were falling and the air was crisp and full of the scent of wood smoke, Paxton and Grushna sat together on their porch one last time, surrounded by their children and grandchildren, and they told the story of how they met, how they fell in love, how they defied the whole world to be together. The children listened with rapt attention, even though they had heard the story countless times before, because it was not just a story. It was their history, their legacy, the foundation upon which everything in their lives had been built. "Tell us the best part," Alara's oldest daughter asked, her eyes shining with anticipation. Paxton and Grushna looked at each other and smiled. "The best part," Paxton said, "is that we got to spend our lives together. That we got to raise a family and watch you all grow into the amazing people you have become. That we got to prove to the world that love is stronger than hate, and that courage is not the absence of fear, but the choice to do the right thing even when you are terrified." "The best part," Grushna added, "is this moment right here. All of you together, healthy and happy and free. That is what we fought for. That is what it was all for." And as the sun set on that perfect autumn evening, painting the sky in shades of amber and gold, the family sat together in the place where it had all begun, bound by love and blood and shared history, a living testament to the power of choosing compassion over cruelty, connection over isolation, love over fear. Paxton took Grushna's hand, his weathered fingers intertwining with hers, and he squeezed gently. She squeezed back, and in that simple gesture was everything they had ever said to each other, every promise they had ever made, every moment of joy and pain and triumph they had shared. "From today until forever," Paxton whispered. "Forever," Grushna agreed. And the story, their story, the story of the man who protected an orc woman and the love that changed the world, came to its close not with fanfare or drama, but with exactly what they had always wanted: peace, family, and the deep contentment of knowing that they had lived their lives fully, loved completely, and left the world better than they found it. The end came gently for them both within days of each other, as if neither could bear to be without the other for long. They passed in their sleep, hands still clasped, faces peaceful, surrounded by the family they had built and the love they had nurtured for so many years. The funeral was attended by hundreds, humans and orcs alike, all coming to pay their respects to the couple who had shown them a different way. They were buried side by side on the hill overlooking the farm, beneath a tree that Paxton had planted the year Elara was born. Their grave marker was simple, bearing only their names and the words they had spoken to each other on that first night. "Your name is under my protection." And though Paxton and Grushna were gone, their legacy lived on in their children and grandchildren, in the families of humans and orcs who followed their example, in the peace that grew stronger with each passing generation. The farm remained in the family, passed down through the years, and it became a place of pilgrimage for those who believed in the power of love to heal the divisions between peoples. The story was told and retold, each generation adding their own details and interpretations, but the heart of it remained unchanged. Once, in a time of great division and hatred, a man and a woman from different worlds chose to see past their differences and build something beautiful together. And in doing so, they changed everything. Their names became synonymous with courage and compassion, with the radical act of choosing love in the face of fear. And though many years passed, and the world continued to change and evolve, the story of Paxton and Grushna remained, a reminder that the smallest acts of kindness can have the greatest impact, that love is stronger than any force that tries to destroy it, and that when we choose to protect and value each other, regardless of our differences, we create something that can never truly be destroyed. In the end, that was their gift to the world. Not grand proclamations or sweeping changes, but simply the example of a life lived with integrity, courage, and an unwavering commitment to loving someone completely, even when the whole world said it was impossible. And in a small cabin on the frontier, where it all began, the story lived on, passed from generation to generation, a beacon of hope for anyone brave enough to believe that love can conquer all.